With our words, we paint tales, short and epic, of love and heartbreak, of happiness and despair, of triumph and tragedy, stories of this world and beyond, pictures of the past, the present, and the future. If we practice our craft well, we can, for a time, hold the reader's heart in our hand, feel its beat, and let our heart pulse in rhythm with theirs. And for those brief moments, we are one.
And that is a writer, okay? If you cannot fit that description, you're not a writer, and you do fit it to a T.
Thank you.
Okay? So, as a fiction writer, did your characters dictate your writing when you started, or were they already premeditated in your mind as to how you were going to write the plot?
They were not created before I started writing the book. I had had the idea for the main character, for Marcus Diablo, and for his wife Annie, and for their two sons, Bodie and Garrett. That was the nexus of the story. Beyond that, those characters...
Okay, if you cannot fit that description, you're not a writer, and you do fit it to a T.
Thank you.
Okay? So, as a fiction writer, did your characters dictate your writing when you started, or were they already premeditated in your mind as to how you were going to write the plot?
They were not created before I started writing the book. I had had the idea for the main character, for Marcus Diablo, and for his wife Annie, and for their two sons, Bodie and Garrett. That was the nexus of the story. Beyond that, those characters evolved as I wrote the book. As I found myself in need of a tool to take the protagonist to what I knew was the eventual end of the book, I created those tools as I went through. And it sort of just came along. And I realized as I finished the book, I met other writers, I attended some conferences, and I found that writers write differently. Some writers storyboard, some writers do lots and lots of character development prior to writing. I didn't do any of that. I just wrote. And as I wrote, it just sort of came as it was required.
Were you scared?
Not really. When I was scared was when I had 250,000 words of manuscript and I needed it to 100,000. Then I was scared.
Yeah. You got to cut all this.
I got to throw all the good stuff away. Yeah.
That's an incredible, there was a movie they did a while ago where the writer was, I never got to see the movie, but I saw the coming attractions where as the writer was writing, the characters became alive and they came toward. And that was one of the things that always hits me, like if you write a real powerful story like you did with your book, what happened to those characters? Are they still haunting you?
Yeah, the characters are still very much there. And I've been working on a second book with the same characters. I had an idea that I would write a second book with the same characters, but as I was having difficulty over time getting someone interested in this book, I decided I would work on some different projects, and so I left the second book for a while and worked on some other projects. But then when this finally got picked up by a publisher, I started back on the second book. I left a lot of room for character development. There's relationships in the book that are just budding right now, that are not developed, and I think as a reader that sort of leaves you with this question: well, what if? What's going to happen with Marcus and Chaya? Yes. What's going to happen with that relationship? And the Force 10 team, I delved into a few of the characters, a few of them fairly deep, but some of them I've left very superficial. And so there's lots of room for developing more character, deeper storylines.
And this book, Redemption Road, is now 110th for Amazon ranking in new releases. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
There was an area that you spoke about going under morphine. And the only way to find out more about that experience would be to read the book. But give us a little bit taste about it so that the audience can see what's it all about. Well, a little bit about it anyway. On page 186, what it's like to be under morphine. I can tell you that I'm allergic to morphine.
How long the angel carried him, he couldn't say. An eternity, maybe. And at that moment, he hoped it would be. All he knew was that he was safe and warm and at peace. He could feel the earth below him, breathe in her scent, and feel her life force, her strength, her age, and her infinite mystical power. Somewhere along the journey, he lost his blessed angel, and the next instant he was back at the cabin.
Right, that's and there's more to it, but we'll leave it at that. So, what is about Marcus Diablo that you think readers will most identify with?
I think that in terms of books in general and people who are avid readers, there's always this classical sort of formula for a book. Good guy gets wronged, good guy gets even, good guy wins in the end. It's sort of that feel-good kind of story. So that was kind of in the back of my mind when I created Marcus Diablo. I always think that from a man's standpoint, we always want to think that we would lay our life down for the woman that we love, that we would go to the ends of the earth to protect her. Now, whether that's actually true or not, I can't say, but we certainly would like to think that. And I think that from a woman's standpoint, I think that in general, women would always like a guy who would be her knight in shining armor, who would do anything and everything if she were in danger to save her. And so that played a big part in how I wrote the book and in how I spun the story. And even though there's a tragic end to one of the main characters in the book, her spirit is such that she wants that. She wants resolution to that end. She wants her knight in shining armor to be successful, to save her, to get her out of the tower at the end of the book.
Yes, I felt when I was reading your book, Redemption Road, I felt that it was for men as well as women.
I think so.
It absorbs both.
I hope so. I hope that it is. In fact, when I wrote the book, the first person to read it was a gal that I was coaching basketball with my youngest son's basketball team, and there was a gal who came every day to practice. Her son was playing on another team. Her daughter was playing on another team. And she was reading every day. And so I had the manuscript, and I had not had a woman read it. I had not let my wife read it yet, for obvious reasons that you'll know when you read the book. And so I just brought the manuscript to her and said, I see you reading every day. Would you mind reading this? And she said, sure. And so she read it. And because it was in manuscript form, she had to restrict her reading to it pretty much at home at night. Mm-hmm. It was too bulky to carry around and read. And her insight into the book was really helpful for me. She liked it as a woman reader. She did find a few things in the book that I absolutely changed. Where she felt that the Marcus character was a little insensitive. And mostly the insensitivity was to his sons. And so she just felt that it needed to be softened a little bit. And so the women readers who actually beta read the book, all of them brought some really, really good insight into the book. The changes were subtle, but when I read the book now, they absolutely were essential to making it the book it is today.
Yeah, because he is loved by everybody.
That's good.
Even in the even with the people that he's. I don't want to give out the plot because it's such a good plot, so I'll just stop at that one. But it is wonderful. He's a tough guy, but yet he does have sensitivity.
And part of creating him was I wanted the reader in the beginning to be. I wanted him to be on Marcus's side in the very beginning of the book. I wanted the reader to be very attached to him. But then I wanted the reader to go 180 degrees and really question him. Is this man, is he any better than that which he tries to defeat? Is he any better than that?
I know what you mean.
And so I wanted the reader to go 180 degrees, but in the end of the book, I wanted him to come full circle. I wanted him to be back in his camp. I wanted them to be back on his side. I wanted them to feel that he had completed his journey and that they understood that journey.
Yes, yeah. And I think you did a great job at doing that because in the end it comes all together. I don't usually buy a book by its cover. Well, it may attract me, but I go by the first paragraph of what it says. That's what gets me into it, to start reading it and going on to it. And when I picked up your book, what happened is I would end the page and just go right into the next one and then go to the next one. It just kept going like that, like what's going to happen next. And that's what a thriller is.
Yeah, that's
right?
how it should be written. Yeah.
So Would you read just so that the audience has a feeling about from this? It says Chapter 1, Diablo Family Cabin, Eastern Sierra Mountains, from here to Hoover Wilderness. That would be, I think, that'll give you a feeling of what I'm talking about.
The steam rose in lazy wisps from the mug cupped between Annie Diablo's hands as she gazed out the cabin windows at the morning light awakening the gray granite peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Turning away from the view, she looked at her husband Marcus, who was kneeling on the stone floor, methodically placing gear arranged in ordered piles by the 4 backpacks laying in front of him. This morning, they and their sons, 12-year-old Bodie and 8-year-old Garrett, would be heading out for 6 nights in the Hoover Wilderness.
Don't you want to follow that? Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. So, what is the name of your next book?
The name of the next book is Saint or Sinner, and that is a working title. So whether that title will stay when the book finally gets to publication, we'll have to see.
For a new writer, someone that just wants to start writing, what would you recommend that this person do?
I think that having a good idea is really the first starting point. But I think the most important part of it, the sooner you can let go of your work, the more successful you're going to be. And I don't mean that you don't need to be personally invested in it, you do. But you have to be able to stand back and look at your work and have other people look at it and be able to accept the criticism that this may not be in the form that you've created it. You can almost count that it's not viable in that form. It's going to require a lot of different work. It's going to have to be rewritten. It's going to have to be restructured. That just seems like everything I've done, that's an absolute certainty that that's going to have to happen. And if you are so attached to it that you're unwilling to make those changes, to try to take that piece of work and make it commercially viable, and that's the key here, is to make it commercially viable. If you just want to write for yourself, for your family, to have a book for your children, that's one thing. But if you want to try to take this thing out and make it a product that you could sell, that could be in bookstores, then that automatically means that you're going to have to distance yourself from that work. Exactly.
I agree totally on that. If someone wants to find your book, where would they find it?
They can find it on Amazon. All they have to do is enter Redemption Road or Mark Shaff, and it will come up.
So your website is?
My website is markshaff.com, and they can go on there. That'll take them directly to my website, and there's information about the book at the website. They can find out information about me, about future projects. It's all right there.
Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
I just would like to let everyone know that the experience of writing a book was something for me that I found to be kind of this self-exploration. I found out a lot of things about myself as a man, as a father, as a husband. I learned things about myself in terms of how I treat my sons and my wife, that things that I think every day that are totally fine. When I wrote the book like that, people would say, well, you can't have dialogue like that. You can't say that to your sons in that way because it comes off wrong. And so it gave me pause to learn a lot about myself. And I also enjoyed the freedom of writing. It was just this really exhilarating process.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much,
Veronica. For being here today.
My pleasure.
You're very welcome. Until the next